Hello everyone, welcome to my next series of tutorials. In today's lesson I will teach you guys how to create camera pawns, which you guys will use later to navigate as well as zoom in and zoom out to specific locations within the scene. And it's very common thing to have, especially when you create a configurators, since cameras can be switched between the depending on the scenery of course you have. But because in this lesson I want to touch base more of how you can use blueprints, especially pawns, when it comes to certain elements of the configurator. So to begin with, let's go. So you can create your own self like a camera pawns folder, and in this instance I made it this way. And of course, right click and look for blueprints. Specifically, what we want to do is use pawn. So and let's call it BP camera 1. So it's the first camera. Let's go, and now once you open it, what we want to do is start adding components to it. So that instance will be spring arm. So spring arm is like a separator, the distance that will help you to position between the camera and center point here. And of course you need camera as well. So let's look for camera. So as you can see, we have a little setup already for us. So next bit obviously is to make sure we are going to program our zoom and zoom out setup here. So of course, to do it we need to first include some bits and pieces in our input inside the project folder, project settings. So if you go navigate, go to input, and all we need to do is start adding axis mapping, because at the moment what's happening is that we don't have the events that will allow us to zoom in and zoom out and in specific locations, especially when it comes to using the camera pawn. So we have to basically add them. So in that instance, it's quite simple. So what you need to do is add axis. So in that instance, what I'm going to do is to make turn. So in that case will be our mouse X. And let's make this slow, because if it's higher it's a bit too fast. And then look up. So that's where we're going to use Y values of mouse. So and that's going to be 0.5, so it's a positive. So there's a reason why, because as you move around at X every turn, the mouse may behave slightly different depending on the people's preference, but it is good to put it minus, because it's going into the natural direction as it follows with the camera pawn. So I think we're good here. So next bit is to go back to our camera pawn, go to our event graph, and now let's start programming this entire camera view. In that instance, zoom in, zoom out. But before we do anything, we have to make sure that camera actually has some action. So we need to look for execution. It's called input axis turn. That's the one we just actually included. So in our case, it's turn. So this will allow us to move around, and of course to enable the yaw as well as pitch, which the axis rotation, we actually have to look for the function that enables to do it. So in that instance would be add controller, and that instance would be input. Sorry, this will be not input. Sorry, it's going to be yaw. Add controller yaw, and that automatically has its own amount of float that it uses as it iterates every single frame. Now we look for lookup. Yep, this is our axis event there. So we add controller, and then that instance would be pitch. So we'll be pitching as we move upwards area, and just to test it, of course. But before you'll do any testing, you have to first make sure that your pawn is enabled, which means that the pawn controls are enabled within that menu bar. Otherwise, it's not gonna even pick the slightest of things. So to do it, of course, you just have to enable this way, and make sure that it's at 0. So this is our main first controller. Everything seems to be okay. So let's just compare and see what it looks like. So, and of course, let's place this our camera here, just so that we have it around those areas here. Okay. You see? There we go. Well, as you can see, it works. So at the moment, as you can see, you can just move around it, but of course there's not much you can do apart from just moving around. So, and it would be nice to create a little lag as well in our situation. So in that case, we need to refine here some small settings for our spring arm just to make it slower. So if you just put the values here, and maybe it would be good to not having 10 but 5. And let's go for 5 here as well to rotation lag. I think we are good here. Let's just test it. As you can see, it lags, right? And that's really nice because this is more natural. Because by doing so, you don't have that rapid, quick motion movement. Because sometimes it may cause a bit of headache. So this doing that, you still have time to capture the scenery and glaze, as well as the gaze on every aspect of your scene. So it comes very handy doing that. So next step I wanted to actually introduce you guys is to how actually can you add a field of view. So field of view, I don't know if you know anything about in terms of doing this cameras there. If you look at camera field of view, specifically on the camera component, there's a little option there you can change your field of view according to what position you are. So as the field of view changes to smaller, it zooms in. As it gets bigger, zooms out. So having this set, so we are going to rely on these. We're going to rely on this settings here, components. So let's go back to our camera pawn. Let's separate this somewhere else. And also let's just remove that for now, we don't need that. And also what we are going to do is to look for mouse wheel down, and we're going to have mouse wheel up. Now what we want to do is to actually use our camera and control that field of view. But of course, to do so, you need to access some certain part of the component. So in order for you to do it, just drag and drop here on this space from your component menu and look for field of view get. So this will enable you to view, especially enter those settings the ones you really wanted to change, especially in real time. And of course, for us to control this, we need to create new variables. Let's look for the variables. And that instance are gonna call max FOV. Yep, and let's turn this to a float. Drop it there. And our instance, let's make this 100. Okay, let's first compile this. That turns this to 100. So this is the maximum we can zoom it out. And now, because we want to create a condition where we can, the field of view becomes bigger, which means the number of field of view becomes bigger, and then it will allow us to set the field of view at a certain distance. So in order for us to do it, we need to look for the condition. This is our condition here, and we have to use a float. And of course, we have to use in that instance branch in order to take this condition and apply the condition. So if we press it, we got two setups. We cannot bring our camera again, so let's just do this again and look for field of view, and in this instance we will set it so we are able to control some of the settings here. So let's just drag more variables, connect it with this. Okay, just place them just like this, so at least we can get it more tidy. Set this to true. placed it away. So next bit is to basically we can do is literally copy this and duplicate it here, but in that sense here we are going to slightly change something stuff. So instead of a macro view, we are going to actually we can just copy this, but in that instance we are going to add the value here. So in this case would be a plus float, and then just connect it to a field of view, just simple as that. And this will be our wheel down, which means every time we scroll the wheel down that goes front, as the wheel is scrolling out forward, down, and that will make the field of view smaller, which means we'll see more things and then the surround. So now we are going to create a full field of view as it gets smaller. So in that instance we need to create a new variable, and this will be our min full. Sorry. So what's the number? Okay, so it's this case will be 60. We're gonna test this once we create these conditions. We'll test it, but so we don't have to really do much apart from copy and paste what we've done already in this one, but we are just going to change few conditions just to make it work for other mouse control. So in this instance we have to change this to the opposite, bigger or equal, and of course instead of using max we will use minimum value, and that will be the same for that. Sorry. So the field of view, so we can read of this, connect with this, and we are going not to use plus, but we're gonna use minus. So if you go for minus float, and then we just basically adding those values, and then we definitely turn into functional wheel up condition. So let's comment this, and we call this let's call it camera FOV minimum, and then we call this up or camera FOV maximum. So make it small as well. Okay, let's compile this. So I think we're good. But beforehand, what we can do as well is to make sure we see the mouse on the screen, and that's quite relatively easy to do. So because we removed some of those events that we had originally, so I'm gonna bring them back to it graph, and what I'm going to do is to make sure I'll be able to see the mouse. So in that instance I need to look for set mouse, show mouse cursor, show mouse cursor. Set to show. In this instance we need to set the get player control so that player control will be able to see the mouse for the camera. So this is like a very simple setup on how you can enable mouse in your screen, and this will be very handy in the next tutorials where we're going to be enabling menus on the scene, especially for the camera. And I think we should be okay now. Just to double check we are having all set. So if I save it, play it, yep, it works. So you can literally do is to zoom in and zoom out, just like that. Zoom in and zoom out. But just to finish this lesson, let's create a very simple sort of like a switch between cameras. So I can show you do this, but in this instance I'm gonna very quickly show it how to do with level blueprint. So if I right click and look for one key, and I'm going to look to possess the cameras. So at the moment I have first this camera here, but let's say I want to create more cameras. Okay, so in this case I'm gonna call this camera 2. and just place it around here. I don't know, somewhere here maybe. Yeah, it's just to see where it's about the camera. Oh, sorry, just let me just pilot it through. Okay, maybe around here. Okay, just leave it there. Yep, finish this. Okay, somewhere here. Okay, let's keep it clear. And let's save it. And then let's go back. And of course, we wanted to change between cameras. So I'm gonna look for flow that is flip-flop. And now, because we on the scene we have both cameras, so we can just select them and drag and drop them in the space here. And in that first one, we are using camera 2, so we call it possess. You need to make sure context sensitive is unticked to see more options. So you want to possess this camera, and also you want to use get player controller, so to show that we are using the first controller as being possessed. And let's do the same thing for this one. Just duplicate this, look for it, connect to the same box there. There you go. Let's just slightly take them away from each other. So if I compile this, and of course make sure this is disabled so it doesn't get confused which camera is using. So if you click, yep, now you can, if you press 1, you can change the camera position just the way you want to. So this is how simple pretty much it is, and there's not much difficult in this. The only thing we need to do is to follow some basic logic on the cameras, and using pawns help you to for you to actually use this functionality to switch in between different camera positions, and this is very handy. So as you can see, I've created this scene way before, and it was just a personal project with the help of my co-founder as well, and of course in the next coming lessons we'll be digging more about how we can actually use these cameras and have their own menus, and having that menu you can enable and disable certain cameras, and also maybe by selecting some of the objects change the colors as well. And hopefully you guys found it very useful, and what I'll be doing from time to time, I'll be creating those kind of bite-sized tutorials for everyone. And my interest, definitely our interest as a company, we are here to also give you fresh knowledge on how you can use it for AEC projects, especially in real time. And it'll be very useful for you guys to learn some bits and pieces, of course, with Unreal. And thank you so much for having me, and see you guys in the next session.